Hi, let's talk a little bit about big data. First, I'm going to start off with a statement. Facts are not truth. What do I mean by this? A couple years ago, when I was in college, my class, we were watching a presentation. It was from someone in the anti-money laundering, counterfeit, and fraud department, one of the banks. It was a good presentation. One of my classmates asked a question about, what is something humorous that you see in your job? And the presenter talked about, looking at a credit card report or whatever, it's like purchase for a high-end mountain bike, then half hour later, purchase from the liquor store, and then the next purchase was an ambulance ride. You probably just pictured, just like we did in our class, you probably just pictured an 18 to 24-year-old male who, went to the hospital after drinking and mountain biking crazily. I'm not saying that's wrong. It's not necessarily has to be the truth though. It could have been, like someone like me, father, buying a gift for his son. And, I'd like to, buy some drinks, especially celebratory drinks. What if, his wife was pregnant and, the ambulance ride was a trip to the hospital when his wife went into labor. And the point is that a single data point, even multiple data points in a row, is not necessarily an absolute truth that we think it is. So I think that it's very important that, we bring this up and why should we be worried about big data? There's a few things we need to look at to underscore that. We're going to look at some definitions of what we're talking about. We also want to talk about the misuse of data, both accidental and intentional. So, first of all, some definitions. So, when we're talking about big data, what are we talking about? Well, Wikipedia defines big data as a broad term for data sets so large or complex that traditional data processing applications are inadequate. It's a good beginning. Also, another word you hear a lot in conversations about big data is metadata. Merriam-Webster defines metadata as data that provides information about other data. But I think those are both misleading. When we talk about big data, we're not talking about data. Data is just names on a page, numbers in a list. What we're actually talking about is analytics. Oxford defines analytics as the systematic computational analysis of data or statistics, or information resulting from the systematic analysis of data or statistics. And that's the key one. Information resulting from analysis of data. That's what we are talking about when we talk about big data. And it's an important distinction. Big data is just, as I said, it's just names on a list. That means nothing. It's only when we analyze that big data that it actually becomes pertinent to the conversation at hand, whether that's for police investigations or companies and advertising and trying to sell your products. So it's important to keep in mind that anytime people are talking about big data, we mean analytics. So let's get on to some accidental misuse of big data and why I think we need to be careful about it. I know myself, over the course of my life, I've spent hours on the phone with government or government departments or government agencies or rental places trying to correct information that is wrong. Trying to tell them no, you have my postal address, my postal code is incorrect, or no, I haven't lived there, I lived at this particular address. You've probably done the same. It's very important. Think about it. If we rely so much on more and more, we rely on big data and data points, and how hard is it to correct information that is wrong or misleading? And how often do we come across that? Because it's a lot of the time. I watched John Oliver last week tonight, show on HBO. He did a show recently about credit scores. Credit scores are so important in our lives. When you go for a job application, or when you're trying to sign a rental agreement, or trying to get a loan or a line of credit from a bank, they're looking at your credit scores. And he was pointing out that 5% of the time, 1 in 20, it has mistakes on your credit report, and it's so important to everybody's life. But 1 out of 20 adults has misleading information about their credit scores. And this goes back years. I mean, like back to the 90s. You know, even in the 90s, we were making jokes about like everybody has problems with their credit history. It's like it's such an important data point, and it's wrong. How is that okay? How is it that this is not brought up more in conversations where we talk about big data, like that it's important that big data is correct, and so many times it's wrong. Not only that, he was pointing out in the video how hard it is to correct mistakes about your credit score. And we want to trust police and government with more data? It's not important how the mistakes are made, it's important that there are mistakes, and we're going to rely on it? Really scary. Let's go into like, especially when it comes to intentional misuse. I was reading, June 8th I think it came out, or it's around the time I read about it anyway, June 8th or 9th. But this individual, a man named Devontae Sanford, he was in jail for 8 years, and just released after 8 years in jail, because finally new evidence came to light. But not really finally. 2 weeks after this man, Devontae, pled guilty, the real murderer came out and told the police, no, I'm the murderer, you have the wrong man in prison, I'm the killer, and he was a confirmed hitman or whatever. And yet, the police still put Devontae Sanford in jail for 8 years, and it took 8 years before a judge finally released him. Institutional bias is a huge factor. We cannot just trust that the government or the police, or corporations for that matter, companies for that matter, are going to use our data in a pure, unadulterated way. That there won't be mistakes. That these mistakes that are made will never be life-changing, will never be detrimental to people. It's too big of a stretch. There are going to be mistakes. Ask Devontae Sanford how well that went for him. We talked about metadata earlier, and the reason I brought it up is the NSA has a lot of metadata. They want to have the records of all the phone calls of Americans. But they talk about they don't need the phone call, like the words that are spoken, just the time and the number and this metadata. But why do they want it? What's so important about this metadata? And it's actually hard to say. Since the time of 2013, when Edward Snowden revealed all these programs of the NSA has only been able to confirm one case of where metadata actually solved the crime. Only one. Confirmed. And the government ruled last year, in 2015, that the US government ruled that the collection of metadata was illegal. Does this mean that the NSA has stopped collecting it? The cynical part of me says no. We still have that large complex in Utah, which hasn't been decommissioned, so I'd say not. This is important. Why not? What can we do with this? Having so much data it's going to be life-changing in the future. What are we going to do with this? The Latin phrase, quis custodiet ipsos custodes? Who watches the watchers? What are we going to do with this data? What are we doing as we move forward? I don't have the answers. I'm not sure that anybody does at this moment. But it's important that we ask questions about it. What do we want to do with this data? What are the rules and regulations going to be? Who can collect it? How long can they store it? What can it be used for? These are really important questions that we do need to ask in the future. We need to be aware of, like when companies are talking about big data, talking about analytics, we have to be very careful with what we are going to do with our data, because there is going to be misuse of that data, whether it's intentional, whether it's accidental, whether the mistakes are accidental or intentional. We need to be aware that this is going to be a very important issue as we move into the future.